All right, AP Calc. Today we're going to go over how to find limits from tables and graphs. So if you missed the lesson or you need a quick review, here you go. This comes from the worksheet classwork limits from tables and graphs. So we're going to go through this. The first one says the table below gives values. This is the wording that I get from like Khan Academy problems and from AP exams. And down here it says based on this, what is the approximation for the limit as x approaches -5 of this particular function. And so as we go this way along the x values, you can see they get closer to -5. As we go this way, they also get closer to -5. -5 is not actually on our table here, but we want to pay attention to the y values. So as we come from the left, what happens to these? 7.1, 7.01, 7.001 seems to get closer and closer to 7. Same thing as we come from this side, seems to get closer and closer to 7. So we would say that the limit here is 7. Now one thing to pay attention to is it doesn't even matter. I could have had an extra entry in my table, -5, and say this is 3. That would not affect the limit at all because the limit is what happens to the y values as we get closer and closer. It doesn't matter if at -5 it actually turns into a different value because we can see that the y values from both sides are approaching the same number. We might write f of -5 is equal to 3, but that's not the same as the limit. So the limit for this problem is just 7. Number 2. What is the best approximation as we're getting closer and closer to 6 of this function? So again, looking at the table, we can see that the x values are getting closer to 6, just below and just above. And then we look at the y values. So when you're looking at the y values, think of it as two sides here. On the left side, as we get closer and closer, what happens to these numbers? They get closer to 12. And as we go from the other side, these numbers are also getting closer to 12. So since the y values get closer to 12 from both sides, we say that the limit is 12. Number 3. Number 3 is a little bit different because it has this little minus sign here. So let me make that a little bit clearer. This is a superscript and it's after. It doesn't mean -2 because it's not before it. It means we're approaching x equals 2 or approaching 2 from the left side, from the negative side. So that means that we can just focus on this part as we get closer and closer from the bottom on the x values, what happens to the y's. So we're not even concerned about the numbers over here. It's just that the y values look like they're getting closer to 10. So the limit, this is a one-sided limit from the left, that's equal to 10. Number 4 is a similar problem, except now we're coming from the positive side. So we're coming from the right as the x's get closer and closer to 2. And again, we want to just ignore these for right now. And what happens to the y values? Well, on this side, they're going up and up and up. It seems like if we were to continue, if we put in like 2.0001, then this might be like 9,000. So it looks like it's unbounded. We can write either infinity, or we can write the phrase does not exist. Does not exist sometimes is abbreviated DNE. So either one, I like infinity, prefer that because that gives us more information telling us it's just going to keep going up and up and up. But either one would be correct. Now for number 5, here we're approaching 2. And again, do not be confused that these both start with a -3. Look at it from both sides. So if we come from the left and the x's get closer to 2, what happens to the y values? Well, it looks like they're getting closer to -3. But when we come from the other side, and the x's get closer to 2, what's going on with the y values? They seem like they are getting closer and closer to -4. So if you have one side going to one number and another side going to another number, then the limit does not exist. So does not exist, or DNE. All right, number 6. Here's a table, and which of the following conclusions is supported by the data in the table. So this one's made as a multiple choice. So the first one says, as we go to 5 from the right, the limit is 7. So if we come in from 5 to the right, notice 5 is not in here, but these values seem to go up and down and alternate and get bigger. So it doesn't seem like that's equal to 7. So not A. B is saying as x approaches 7 from the left. Well, x's, there's no 7s in this list here, not even close. So it can't be B. C, as x approaches 5, is the limit 7. Well, we just said this side, the right side, is not 7. The left side, though, that appears to be 7, but it's not the same on both sides. So it has to be D is the best answer. As x approaches 5 from the left, then the limit is getting closer to 7. D is the best choice. On the second page, we have some graphs. So here's our first one. The limits as x gets closer to 1 from this graph. So we're getting closer and closer to 1. And here's our little trail. We're going to come from the right side. We're going to come from the left side. As x gets closer to 1, our y values would narrow in and get closer to 4. Number 8. As we get closer and closer to 1, what's happening here? So again, imagine coming from the left side. If we come from the right side, do the y values come out to be the same thing? And they do. They come out to be 3. Even though it's an open circle, we're considering as we get closer and closer. And it doesn't matter that there's a point down here. We're taking the limit. Do the values of the y's get this closer and closer to the same number? Yep. So here it would be 3. Number 9, the limit as x approaches -2. So if we come from the left side of -2, we'd follow this trail. If we come from the right side, we would come down this way. Does it look like they're going to go to the same number? Absolutely not. So we got 2 different one-sided limits here. So this one does not exist. This one's a similar graph, except this time we're coming from the left. So if we come from the left, we're just looking at this direction. So as we come from the left and we get closer and closer to -2, what is the y value? The y value down there would be -3. And number 11, now we are approaching -2 from the positive direction, from the right side. So from the positive direction means we come from the right, approaching -2. What happens to the y values? They would get closer and closer to this open circle with a y value of -1. And then the last one on this sheet, as we get closer to 2 from the left, you can see what happens to the y values. They just keep going up and up and up. And as we approach from the right, again, we get closer and closer. The y values are just going to keep going up and up and up. So we could write that the limit here is equal to infinity. And I guess you could also say that the limit does not exist, although I think infinity is a better answer because it gives you more information about what the graph is actually doing. So hopefully that helps, and that's it for taking limits from tables and graphs. Have a great day.